So again, thanks to Wallace and Ryan at School Rubric for hosting this webinar. And thank you all participants for taking your time out of a Saturday, whether it's morning or afternoon to attend. As Wallace said, I'm currently an independent math consultant. And I launched this business last fall after being a K-12 math coach and high school math teacher for about 20 years. So just a little bit about me and where I am in the world right now, what's going on in my life. I live in Jubail, Saudi Arabia. It's in the eastern province of Saudi. I've been here for the past 5 years. I've got 2 middle school daughters and they attend the local international school. They've been on virtual school since March 10th, so about 5 weeks. So I've seen that as a parent side as well. Right now, Saudi is pretty much completely shut down. There's no international or domestic flights. We have a curfew. There's no taxis, no buses, no trains. Supermarkets, restaurants with delivery and takeout are open, and pharmacies. It's a real uncertain time. We don't know when these restrictions are going to end. And in particular, both us and families around us are not sure whether we'll be able to return to our home countries, in my case it's the US, as we normally do, to visit family members and friends, back home. For me, home is in Ithaca, New York, in upstate New York. There's a lot of uncertainty in our times right now, and I'm sure the same that can be said for most of you and most of the world right now. For me right now, I currently don't have my own virtual classroom. However, I've been virtually supporting educators around the globe as they make this transition to online learning. So I prepared today 5 lessons from the mathematics classroom, how to be your best virtual self. I like to begin with this quote from Paulo Freire. Whoever teaches learns in the act of teaching, and whoever learns teaches in the act of learning. You can feel free to jump in the comments and express, what this quote means to you. To me, it really resonates with me because of his use of the word act. So think about the act of teaching and the act of learning during normal times. What do these acts look like in your brick and mortar classroom? Now, during these extraordinary times, what has changed about these acts? I would argue that one change is that we are all in the act of being first-year teachers again. In the early 2000s, I taught in Seattle Public Schools. During that time, I also taught a math methods course for pre-service MED students at Seattle University. And I used to tell the pre-service teachers, your first year of teaching is hard. It's really, really hard. It's nearly impossible to live up to the ideals that you envision during your student teaching. Anyone who tells you differently is lying. The act of teaching takes years to perfect, and even then, we can always better our best. That's one thing I love about teaching and learning. And now, we're all back to being first-year teachers again. And this transition to online learning is hard and challenging in many different ways. So acknowledging this, how can we be our best virtual selves? So mathematics lesson number 1. Less is more. And I think Tracy did a really nice job with her teaching guide. Everything's in one place. Parents are using one platform. They know what to expect. In the math classroom, we want students to go deep with the material so they're able to build a conceptual understanding of the mathematics. I chose this picture of pattern blocks because they're a wonderful way to start to build the basics for conceptual understanding of fractions in our youngest learners. We can ask our students, build 1/2. Show me 1/6 of the hexagon. These concrete tools lay the foundation for the future fraction work that will come in upper elementary and middle school. It's challenging to teach for understanding while in person, and even more so virtually. So consider the content you want to teach your students virtually. Now, cut it in half. Cut it in half again. Less really is more. Go slow and go deep. Look at your standards. See what's most important. If you're using Common Core or Arrow math standards, look at the critical areas to inform your instruction. If you're unsure of what they are, reach out to me. I'll help you with your specific grade level. And this less is more idea can be applied to all disciplines, not just mathematics. Mathematics lesson number 2, relationships matter. This is taken from my consulting business as it was my biggest takeaway from my work as a coach. When I was a math coach, if teachers didn't want to work with me, I was dead in the water. The same applies to the student-teacher relationship. Think about this. In 20 or 30 years, When your students look back on where they were during the pandemic of COVID-19, what content are they going to remember? Instead, what will they remember about their teachers? They're going to remember the teacher that drew on chalk in their driveway much more than the math content that was taught. Relationships always matter, but they are particularly crucial now. Every student who is learning virtually is affected by this pandemic. They're missing their routines and their friends. My sixth grader, who until now loved to complain about school, now asks every day when in-person school will start again. Unfortunately, it was just announced that there will be virtual school to the end of this year. Some of our students are affected in much more direct and profound ways than others, and we need to connect first and then focus on the content secondly. Mathematics lesson number 3. We're all learners, and we all learn from our mistakes. Jo Boaler's work on math mindsets, it revolutionized, in my opinion, the teaching and learning of mathematics. Acknowledging that our brains grow from our mistakes was a game changer for me personally. Right now, as we all are trying something new, whether it's using new technology, new ways to formatively assess our students, or new ways to provide students with effective feedback, during this process of newness, it's critical to recognize that mistakes will be made. It's also comforting to know that growth and learning will come from these mistakes. A few weeks ago, I joined a grade 5 class for a virtual number talk. I love number talks. I've modeled dozens of number talks over the past few years. I consider myself a competent number talk practitioner. This one was challenging in ways that an in-person number talks are not. I struggled to keep up with the virtual hand raising. It was nearly impossible to read the class in the same way that I can read it in person. However, I've learned from this. Hopefully my brain grew a bit, and I'll make adjustments the next times I do a virtual number talk with a teacher. Mathematics lesson number 4. Rely on your professional learning network for support and ideas. Are you on Twitter? Do you follow Jo Boaler's mathematics page on Facebook? If not, this is the perfect time to join. I was very reluctant to hop on Twitter a couple years ago, but now I'm so glad that I did. There are hundreds of great videos, activities, and suggestions that people share freely all over social media. You don't need to spend hours reinventing the wheel for your classroom. When I scroll through my Twitter feed, there's hundreds of new math ideas right there waiting for me. It actually can be quite overwhelming, but even if you can't use something directly, it might inspire you with the next great online lesson for your students. In addition, you can also find a great support network connecting with educators from across the globe. Some international schools in Asia are on their 11th week of online learning. Many of these teachers are now sharing their stories and resources with the rest of the world. You'll never know where a Twitter connection might lead. For example, Wallace and I have never met in person. We connected through Twitter. And now here we are on a webinar together. Lastly, mathematics lesson number 5. Give yourself grace. You've probably seen this quote. I love it because it's so true, especially now. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. I would bet that none of us became teachers with the goal of providing instruction in a separate space from our students. I think that one silver lining that will come from this time is that we will all value the in-person student-teacher relationship so much more. Online education has its place, but it will never take the place of caring teachers doing great work in their classroom communities. Don't forget to nurture yourself in your virtual classroom. This looks different for all of us. Maybe it's 10 minutes of daily meditation. Maybe it's finding a new exercise video online. Maybe it's sitting on the couch for 10 minutes by yourself. Maybe it's taking a long walk outside, if you're able to. Maybe it's taking the time to call a cousin you haven't spoken with in a long time, just to connect. Whatever fills your cup, make sure to replenish it continually and consistently. And that's my 5 lessons from our mathematics classroom. I want to thank you all for attending. And thank you, Wallace and Ryan, for this opportunity to present for School Rubric. If you have any questions, there's my information. Please feel free to reach out to me, especially with grade level specific math suggestions for where to find materials. If you go to my website, www.mathematique.us, I have a list of resources. There's my Twitter and my LinkedIn information as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Nicole, excellent presentation. You gave us so much information. I commented in the chat, in a time like this, you are so reassuring. So I'm so glad that I've connected with you, and I know we all feel the same way. But I do have a question for you. Tell us more about how parents and teachers in this remote learning time that we're in, what are best practices for the conceptual understanding with concrete tools? That really resonated with me. What are best practices right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you also alluded to it in your presentation, like we're not going back to the way we used to teach math. I think, well, first of all, I think it really depends on your grade level. And so being grade level appropriate, but using concrete tools that are already in the house and keeping things simple. For example, for kindergarten, I think the Texas standards are pretty similar to Common Core, for the most part, but you're building groups of 10. So you get out the spaghetti, you get out the macaroni, you get out, whatever. We don't want to have parents think that you have to go out and buy the Unifix cubes, that's because that just gets that other impediment of, oh, this new math, we can't do that new math. But I also think one thing that goes great, no matter what grade level you teach, is student as worker, teacher or parent as coach. And so giving students a prompt or no prompt and letting them explain their reasoning. And this is hard for teachers. It's really hard for parents. We want to snowplow out of the way and all the issues and just say, here, do it this way, especially with math, do it the way I was taught. But kind of that message of, give the students 15 pieces of spaghetti. Give your child 15 pieces of spaghetti. See what they do. Do they naturally make groups of 10? If not, could we question them to get there? The problem with that, it does take a lot of time. And it just takes a lot of time to develop in teachers, but also in parents. So I would say kind of shortly, it's too late, keeping it with manipulatives that are around the house and going back to those basic standards of keeping it simple with the simple tools that are available. Now, when you get into middle school, dividing fractions, it looks a lot differently. And quite honestly, it's a lot more challenging.
Nicole,
Thank you for that.
I know I had asked the same question about Tracy about kind of looking at the other side. I think from a teacher perspective, there's a lot of times where kids come back and math is so sequential. And then we always kind of worry about finishing the curriculum. And, kids need to be where they need to be. And presumably, even though parents and teachers are doing the best they can with the school closure, we might get kids back that are in different places and all over the map, even more so than a quote unquote regular year. Maybe broadly speaking, do you have some advice for schools and teachers? What should we do if we come back and we realize that kids are just kind of all over the map, even more so than they've historically been?
Do you want to speak to that first, Tracy?
Well, I'm sorry, I was asking more for Nicole.
Oh, it's me. Oh, sorry. I don't want to overtalk. Sorry. I honestly, I think that as math teachers, and you're right, the sequential nature of math, we're always filling in the gaps. That's always part of being a math teacher. Tracy's nodding her head. Even in kindergarten, you always have that level. So what I expect is that next year, you're going to have an even bigger range of students that are on grade level, behind grade level, and advanced grade level. And I think one thing we can do as a world community, look to places that have gone through this before. You had the Christchurch earthquake a couple years ago in New Zealand. I think students were out for a month or maybe longer. I know there's refugee children who miss an entire year of school, then they catch up. And so I also think maybe, every system is so different, but we're going to have to really look critically at our grade level standards or in math, the critical areas. And I think really get to what are the key takeaways for grade 4 math, grade 5 math. But I in terms of, kind of forward planning there, until we get back in the classroom, I don't think we're going to know. And I think it's going to be so variable depending on where you are in the world and even within a particular school. Like I have colleagues here, friends here in Jubail, where a 3rd grade teacher, and the child has internet, she has a safe space at home. She's never logged on to a meeting because the parents, they stay up late at night. So what do we do with that? We're going to have to figure this out as we're going.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Nicole. That's good. And as a few folks have mentioned in the chat, I mean, that's just going to be a critical issue for teachers and schools as, we kind of come back from this closure, whenever that's going to be, hopefully sooner than later. Ryan, do you want to load up the original?
We have one more question from JX Tang. So let's maybe just have that, JX Tang, if you want to unmute really quickly and just kind of ask your question.
Hi. I am JX from Malaysia. So I have a pretty simple question, which is how do we help students with special needs learn remotely? Students, for example, with reading difficulty or those who are autistic, slow learners, how do they catch up with their peers who are learning the same curriculum?
And that might be good for either Tracy or Nicole or both to address.
Mm-hmm. Am I good to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I think one thing that's key in that situation is our school is, as best we can, I'm going to say this, our school has figured it out, and I think we're doing really well. So we have a grade level meeting each week, and our administrators sit in on that. And then the very next day, we have a broader meeting with all of our special services support. We have ESL, we have the reading specialists, we have the co-teach teachers. So we have this core meeting where we're addressing gaps, needs. Who have we not heard from under that umbrella? What supports do we need to provide? And I will say, JX, is in our learning guide, we've embedded, like I said a minute ago, a lot of videos where the teachers are actually teaching. So we know the kids, we know how to communicate with them, we know how to differentiate the instruction. And that's the beauty of our learning guide. The scripting gives the parents the verbiage, the support. And then we have all of these different resources, challenges. And when I say challenges, I mean challenges for the kid who's the struggling learner, all the way to the kid that's the above grade learner. So there's something for everyone in that document, but the core piece comes in the connections with your team, meeting every week with all of those support services, making sure we're not missing any kids and missing any needs.
Thank you, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get to one more question, then we'll turn it over to you, Wallace. Debbie, do you want to kind of unmute? You just wanted to kind of piggyback off that a little bit.
Hi, good morning. My question was about students who are English language learners themselves and have parents that do not speak English. So as a result are able to give little to no support for any kind of script unless you were going to translate it into patois, Spanish, Hindi, Bengali, any number of, I think we have 5 different languages at our school. How do you adapt these things so that those students can, as you said, which I wrote down, I loved it, they're the worker and the parents are the coach. How can the parents coach them in a situation where they can't even really read what the directions are?
And Debbie, really quick, could you just tell us where you're tuning in from, just so you know? Where...
I'm from Connecticut. I teach at a Title I school where all students are on free and reduced lunch. We have a 70% minority population and a 40% ELL population.
Great, thanks for sharing. Nicole or Tracy, any thoughts?
Nicole, you want to jump in first? I can go next.
Sure. That one, that's a $1 million question, Debbie. I wish I had a better answer in terms of mathematics. I think I know one core resource that we use does have some of those translations. It's never going to have all of them, but the Engage in New York or Eureka Math, they do have quite a few translations, but it's not going to address all of your learners. I think what I would do is, because this is not just going to be for math, this is going to be for every subject. And again, going back to that less is more, And so whatever grade level you're instructing, making sure that the students can access it on their own first. And then possibly for parents is you could tell your students, have a conversation with your parents in their home language about this. Parents can question, say in Spanish or in Hindi, and say, explain to me the math that you're learning. And that could be done in the home language. Now, in terms of turning work in, is it up to the, that parents can't assist with that. But I think this is, I guess the question I would have is, during the regular brick and mortar school, what assistance is being given to parents? For those particular parents, how can we continue that? Or maybe what could we build upon, for those learners?
Yeah, and I worry about that population in particular because many of their parents are essential workers. They're at the post office, they're at the hospital. They are not there to even support what the kids have, and the kids are not understanding. So the parents are coming home after a long day and there isn't that support, and that component is missing, and that's my biggest concern.
No, I hear you. What can we put in place to prevent those gaps from widening even more, not
Right.
just content,
And
but
empower the student more to become an
Yes.
independent learner.
Yes.
Well, and along with that, like Nicole just mentioned, what supports are already in place during school. And I think that would kind of be my jumping off point. I am definitely not the expert in the area, but the thoughts that come to me are that's a situation where live chats, like on Microsoft Teams, or if your school district allows Zoom, that's the perfect example where the face-to-face interaction with the teacher would be key. And all those visual supports that we often use in class, we would be using those same visuals on a live chat, so to speak. And add in your ELL specialist if your campus has one, and kind of do that co-teach in real time. Lots of pictures, lots of manipulatives, and even to lighten things up and have a little fun, maybe a science experiment. I'm that fun teacher that likes to not only teach the kids with the visual supports, but also do something that's really easy that they can understand, that boosts their confidence, which will make them more comfortable to stretch a little bit on this live learning platform.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, actually, your comment made me think about something else, and I don't know if this is possible, Debbie, given your population, but possibly maybe if you could use Zoom, in those breakout rooms, breaking out with students who speak the same language, so they're able to connect with one another, or say, I'm going to host a Google Meet for all Spanish speakers at this time. If you have the teacher support, great, but if not, making a time and space for students to connect together, to kind of say, what does this mean? And, because oftentimes, students can make meaning of the material amongst themselves, speaking, especially speaking that common language. But I agree. I'm definitely not an expert on this one either. It's a great question. It's a hard question.